swiftly on. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our panel. I'm delighted to be joined by Jono and Nino from Yoast, and also from Tom from Novos. Now, before we start, I'd just like to do some intros. So Nino, perhaps you can kick us off. Just tell us a little bit more about Yoast, your role at Yoast, and what it is you guys are doing day to day.
Yeah, cool. Of course, definitely. So my name is Nino. I'm the product marketeer at Yoast, currently working in the Shopify team. We launched our Shopify app in January, so we've been there for like 6 months, 7 months now. And what we're actually doing is helping everyone, being able to compete in the search engine. So our slogan is SEO for everyone, and that's what our mission is as well. We want to make SEO possible for everyone. Make it easy, make it accessible, and that's what we're doing with our app and also with a WordPress plugin and add-ons.
Thank you, Nino. Jono, anything to add to that? What about your role at Yoast? How does that vary?
Oh, good. Varies is the word. So I am head of SEO, and I do, as a company who makes SEO products, that means I kind of touch a lot of areas. I'm a technical SEO nerd. I've got an agency and web development background, so I'm kind of neck deep in what features are we building and what's our roadmap, but also what is Google doing and what does the future of the web look like strategically 10 years from now, so that we're pointing in the right direction, and all sorts of odds and ends. So it's an absolute treat to be kind of touching 13 million websites now, tinkering with their SEO at that kind of scale. So yeah, all fun.
Very good, thank you. And Tom, what about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Tom, head of SEO at Novos. We are a specialist e-commerce SEO agency. Don't touch any of the paid business, literally purely SEO. We also do digital PR. And so this is like a really new area for us, working with Yoast and obviously Nathan. A big factor, to be honest, like we've not actually come up with any Yoast clients yet on Shopify. So super intrigued, obviously, to be working with these guys and to also answer any of your questions.
Brilliant. So thank you. So folks, I'm going to get started. There's already some questions in the Q&A. Can everyone on the panel hear us all okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Let's dive in. The first Q&A question is from Corrine, and good afternoon, Corrine. The question was for the Yoast guys, and what I would say is if any questions come through that we're not sure on, we'll make sure to capture the details, try and follow up with after, etc. But it's when I cut and paste a product description into Shopify and then go to optimizing Yoast SEO, the description area is blank. Jono or Nino, anything you can do to answer that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, it's definitely not something that we expect to happen. If normally we copy everything that you do in Shopify, we copy in Yoast SEO and the other way around, so that you don't have like double content hanging around between those between the Shopify editor and the Yoast editor. So not really sure what's happening there, but I can definitely have our support team have a look at that, because at this moment it's not expected, so I don't have a answer to that, but yeah, let our support team look into that.
Thank you, Nino, much appreciated. Now I'm going to dive straight into the next question, which is really a question that many people are asking us. I'm going to come to you for this one, Tom. Just really, is SEO a good option, or is Shopify a good option when it comes to SEO? I mean, there's a lot of perhaps fake news out there around Shopify and its SEO capabilities, but maybe there's some truth behind it. Genuinely, what do you believe? Is it a good platform for SEO? Is it not? And if it is, why? If it's not, why?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Shopify is brilliant. Like, as far as out the box platforms kind of go, it's probably like the most accessible and the most user friendly, and pretty malleable in the sense that you can do a fairly decent amount of SEO with it. I would say you can probably get, without being headless, get to a good 7 or 8 out of 10 for your SEO from an SEO perspective. So there's a lot you can do. There are some limitations, which I know we'll probably touch on. Someone will have a question at some point in this webinar on it. But like, we work with a lot of Shopify clients. There must be a good 50% of our client base now is on that, purely because it's so accessible, so easy to use, and just great, to be honest. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
So thank you. And I'm like you say, we'll definitely come back to some of the limitations. It's really important today that we're trying to give a balanced argument to Yoast and to Shopify, and it's not just everything's great. Of course, there are some limitations and some frustrations. And also for those of you that are joining us, some that are maybe joining a little bit late, please do use the Q&A section, okay? The idea for today is to get through as many of your questions as possible. Some of you have sent some bits in. I'll get to those as I can, but if not, I'll be going through as much as we possibly can in this session. So thank you, Tom, for that. The next one, I'm going to come to you guys with Yoast, which is, I see Yoast for Shopify has readability metrics. Where are they? What are they? And how do they help my store? And Jono, maybe I'll come to you for this one first, or Nino, feel free to chip in.
Let Nino pitch this one. I think there's some more technical questions we've got coming up later, so maybe I'll tackle some of them. So
Your time will come, Jono. Nino,
Yep.
over to you.
Yeah, so everyone that has used Yoast SEO in the past will know us from our bullets, green, orange, red bullets that really help you get high quality content. One of those analysis, readability analysis, and well, there's multiple things why this is important. First of all, in these days, there's so much content coming out from everywhere about every topic that most of us, also I, myself, we will well, scan blogs probably. We will not read every word. So if your paragraphs are really lengthy or your sentence are really long and you use difficult words, it makes it much harder to scan, which makes it for most people not a really nice blog to read because, well, it costs time to like read difficult words. So that's one thing. Also, if you write in English, it's highly likely that there's many people from other countries visiting your website as well. And they're not all native speakers. So if you want to make your content accessible for all of those visitors, then you also want to avoid too many difficult words because not everyone understands them. So, I mean, that makes it really important to make it readable. Of course, for Yoast, we've got some green and orange bullets. You don't have to always follow them, always use your common sense. It's not always good to always get like green bullets because sometimes if you have a niche product or you have a niche service, of course, there are bound to be difficult words in there that you have to use. So don't stare blind to them. But yeah, it's definitely something we find really important at Yoast. We recently, actually today at Yoast SEO for Shopify and 2 weeks ago for the premium, we released a new feature, word complexity assessment, where we assess which complex words you're using and highlight them to you. So you can look into like, hey, do I want to change this difficult word to make my text easier to read? And there's more stuff like that on the way. So yeah, really nice. Really important.
You know, that's fabulous. Thank you. I've got a really great question in from Teresa, just building on that. And thank you for your question, Teresa. She says, for someone like me who is new to SEO, do you provide training for a layperson to better understand SEO and how to apply the right principles? Let's start with that one, and then I'll go to the second part of our question. Is there a Yoast Academy or somewhere people can go and learn the fundamentals of SEO?
Well, we have an academy, Yoast SEO Academy. So if you buy our app, you get access to all the academy courses, which really helps you get started with SEO if you want to do SEO yourself. There's a copywriting course, keyword research course, all around SEO course, technical SEO course. So if you really want to do SEO yourself, and well, it's meant for laypersons, so it can really help you get started. So yeah, that's something we offer. Yeah.
Perfect. And just to clarify, Teresa's second point was around, do you take the product descriptions and kind of general page text, etc., and make it better following SEO guidelines? I think it's fair to say that while you guys don't make it better, you give people the rules or foundations or principles to give them every possible chance to rank as effectively as possible. So you're not actually doing the work for them, but you're saying, hey, I've had a look, and based on our metrics, this is where you can improve so that you can have a better SEO performance. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, exactly. That's correct. You can see Yoast SEO as a coach. We will help you make your content better, but still you need to put in the work yourself because, well, we can't do everything for the customer because you have the knowledge about your product, about your content. So that's definitely, you have to do yourself, but yeah, we help you get there as a coach. Yeah.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And Teresa, I hope that helps. John, anything to add before I move on?
Just the other side, I guess, which is that about half of what we do is that kind of guidance and coaching on the content. And the other half is we do a whole bunch of technical stuff behind the scenes, which most users shouldn't ever need to know or care about, but they remove barriers and set best practice and tick a whole bunch of boxes to make sure that when you do all the good content and you follow the rules and you optimize your pages, there's nothing in the way of getting those into Google, getting them discovered, getting them in front of the users. So there's kind of two halves to it and they work together really nicely. But yeah, most of the hard work is going to be you using the tools to say, how do I improve this content? How do I make it more compelling, more accessible, and so on?
Really good. Thank you. Yelena, thank you for your question. I'll come to that shortly. I've just got another one for Tom. Otherwise, Tom will be drifting off. Tom, question for you. What are the top 3 things you recommend any merchant should look at when it comes to the fundamentals of SEO?
I'll keep the Shopify specific, but I think like the tech stack's often something that, there's a lot of reliance on third-party apps to do things that you can do within Shopify itself. And the over-reliance on third-party apps causes problems, especially from a site speed perspective, specifically because they're just all rendered via JavaScript. And naturally, for those that haven't got loads of SEO experience, JavaScript is particularly difficult for search engines to digest and understand. It often takes a few different takes for them to come back and fully get to understand that content. So I definitely assess your tech stack. Make sure you're removing any of those redundant apps that you don't use at all and they have no purpose for. Because even if you're not using them, the code is still on your site and it's still causing problems. That's number 1. Number 2, I'd recommend utilizing as much as you possibly can Shopify flows. I think it's probably one of the most neglected areas of Shopify, relatively new-ish. So those that were quickly onboarded with it and got used to using it are maximizing it. But it can be really helpful in just building those like really efficient, good flows. That will improve your overall SEO performance, but not only SEO, like actually you can create flows for many, many different things. And the third one, oh gosh, let's think. What's the third thing? And then I think also definitely like in order to maximize your ability to rank for non-brand keywords, I'd recommend just assessing your product volumes and categories. So don't just think that having a category that targets jeans is going to do you a world of good. Jeans is a very generic term. If you have a variety of jeans that come in different shapes, sizes, fit types, think about how many products do you have? Do you have enough products to satisfy intent? If you do, think about creating more collections to target those because they're longer tail queries, less competitive, and more likely you'll be with a better chance to appear for those types of queries than relying on super generic collections.
Tom, absolutely fabulous. Thank you. That leads me nicely onto Yelena's question, which is, can you explain to me, Yoast team, the focus key phrase and related key phrase and how they're used? She understands that the focus key phrase and what that's about, but not sure how to really utilize the related key phrase as well. So perhaps firstly, you can explain the difference between focus and related, and then also how to get the best from each of them.
Yeah, definitely. So the focus key phrase is the key phrase that you really want your content page or blog post to rank for. So let's say guinea pigs or whatever, you can be anything. And then the related key phrase is something that's slightly it's not a synonym, so it's related, but it's something close enough that you also want your content page to rank for. For instance, if you write about sweets, a synonym could be delicacy, and then a related key phrase could be chocolate or sugar. It's not a synonym, but it's related enough for your content page to rank for, and with this you can aim for multiple keywords that are close enough so that it doesn't hurt your SEO.
Oh, that is brilliant. Thank you. Just to confirm on that, is it one focus key phrase per page and one related key phrase, or is it one key phrase and multiple related key phrases? What's the rules there?
There's always one focus key phrase, so that's really important. And then I believe at Yoast you can have, like with the tool, you can have like 4 or 5 synonyms and I think 6 related key phrases. But yeah, only use them if it's relative. If it's not relative, then irrelevant, then don't use them.
Thank you. And just building on that, and hopefully, this is answering your question. Please let us know if it is or isn't. But just in terms of great, I think most people will be able to choose their focus key phrase. But are there any tools or anywhere you'd recommend so they can find those related key phrases or those synonyms? How do you help people find those?
Well, for keyword research, the most important thing is your brain, I think. I mean, there's many tools like you can use Keyword Planner, Google Ads, or SEMrush, or well, there's a bunch of tools out there. But I think you should always start by using your brain and talk to your customers because they know what they're looking for. So yeah, a combination of those.
And I guess the other thing is that will be different for everybody and unique. So for one site, it might make sense to have a page which is about cats and has a related key phrase of dogs. Maybe you're doing something with animals in general, but another site, those might be two entirely different concepts or products or services that you want to separate and have different strategies for. So it's really going to come down to understanding your audience, understanding your competitors and the marketplace and the opportunity, and saying, okay, I think I've got this page should be about this topic that has these related ideas. And these ones are a separate page over here and trying to carve those up. But yeah, your best tool for that is your brain and your understanding of your audience and your market and your users, because otherwise you're just going to be reading through lists and copy pasting stuff with big numbers, and you're never going to really think about how do these relate and how do people search? What are the questions they have? Where are the divisions between those? What should be one page? What should be two? So yeah, think it through.
Jono, thank you. I'm actually going to come back to you now because like a caged lion, you haven't had too much chance to speak, and I'm keen to tap into that brain of yours. Now, I'm really interested to know a bit more about technical SEO, particularly as a user. A lot of people I talk to are like, okay, I see there's like on page, off page, and there's this technical term. For a layman such as myself, or maybe some in the audience, what is technical SEO and what does that mean to us as a user?
Sure. So I touched on this just now. Ideally, if we're doing our job right, it should mean as little as possible to you. Like you shouldn't have to care about this stuff. But essentially, one of the ways we like to think about SEO is you have to construct and format your content and your pages in a way that search engines and systems like Google can find and access and understand. And then once you've got that out of the way, then they start caring about, okay, what's the content on this page? What's the product? What's the information? Is it compelling? But there's this whole iceberg under the surface of things like how are your meta tags constructed? How does the server respond if the product's out of stock? Is it fast? Have you correctly described all of the attributes of the product and the page in the background? And 1,000 things that Google and other systems look at in order to be able to understand and even start to process that page. And again, like a big part of what the app does that many people won't ever see or need to intentionally is we tick a whole bunch of those boxes. So we add a bunch of stuff to your theme, which sounds terrifying, but it's all done very safely and very reliably. We upgrade a whole bunch of stuff that Shopify does natively. So we ditch a whole bunch of stuff that they do with things like meta descriptions and page titles, which you probably come across, and we replace that with much more sophisticated logic that does things like behaves differently on different templates and behaves differently if it's an error page and that sort of thing. So we take care of things like meta tags, XML sitemaps you might have come across, canonical URLs, structured data I'm sure we'll come on to later, but yeah, we do all of that behind the scenes so you don't have to. That said, if you're a power user and you want to do some advanced clever stuff, we do have a bunch of advanced tools which you can apply page by page. So if you scroll down past all of the what's your key phrase, what's your related key phrases, how are you scoring, you get to an advanced section where you can say, actually, I want to change the rules we give Google about whether they can index this page, whether they should crawl links, what the URL should be, and a whole bunch of other odds and ends that most people won't need to touch. But if you're trying to do clever stuff on a page-by-page basis, it might be worth going and looking at and saying, do I really want Google to be able to access the images on this page? Or is this page a close duplicate of another that we want to consolidate? And again, if all that's a bit too far out there, it's worth digging through the Yoast Academy stuff for guides on how to use this and where it makes sense and where it doesn't. So yeah, ideally, you never have to think about any of this stuff, but if you do want to, the tools are there.
Jono, thank you. I've got a million questions just come in. So coming straight back to you guys shortly. Tom, just going to segue over to you, and then I'll come to those questions that have just come in. Tom, really, the question for you is that a lot of people kind of lose sleep with the Google algorithm and the big Google updates, and they're like, okay, well, what's coming next? And all of a sudden, I'm really doing well on SEO, but I know that any second the algorithm could change and I could lose it all overnight. Kind of a bit of an inside scoop. I see you guys are one of the most respected in the space when it comes to SEO, particularly in the world of e-commerce. is there anything on the horizon that people listening today need to be aware of? Is there anything that we need to keep front and center of our ongoing SEO strategy going forwards?
Yeah, I think always a good question, and it's always a concern for sure. And I think definitely in the past, I think Google updates have been more of a concern than they are now, at least I guess among those that are doing SEO properly and better with customers at the forefront. The way that we work, we try and be as proactive with the enhancements on site as we can be, so as to mitigate any impact that does come from Google updates. Like the most recent ones are all to do with product reviews, and I think EAT is still a huge factor, becoming more and more of a factor every single time an update is released.
Sorry, Tom, EAT, you just mentioned a little acronym there.
Yeah, so expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. It's been rolling out for quite a while, and to be honest, all the recent updates are all kind of tying all into the same picture. It's giving customers as much information as they need to make a well-informed decision on a purchase. So whether that's product reviews, UGC, whether that's guides on how to look after particular items, how to purchase items, how to style yourself, all that sort of content is super, super relevant. And I'll give you like a really apt example of EAT from Specsavers that Laura in my team, she actually pulled out. And when you're looking at how buying a lens, especially those variable lenses, they give you a snapshot of what it looks like to look out into a field with the lens clear and with the lens actually colored, and you get two different perspectives, which is actually super, super relevant. Might make me 20-30% more likely to make that purchase. So the answer is, you need to continually evolve your strategies. Don't be optimizing for search engines, be optimizing for your customers, giving them the information that they need to make a well-informed decision to purchase.
Love that. Thank you, Tom. Now, I know that Jono, for those that haven't seen the chat function, he just very kindly posted in an article from Yoast around what is EAT, which will hopefully just elaborate a bit on that further. Now, I will come to the Q&A because we're getting lots of questions in. And firstly, good afternoon, Kevin, and thank you for joining us. Good to see you, my friend. This is a question for the Yoast guys, which is, what features does Yoast offer to handle competing content for the same target keyword and for internal linking optimization?
So currently, people that know us from WordPress, they know that we have some internal linking features. At this moment, we don't have them yet in Shopify, but we're really thinking about this because this is super important. But because the Shopify platform behaves a bit differently than WordPress, it's quite difficult to make these internal linking features as well in Shopify. And in terms of handling competing content for the same target keyword, I mean, it's difficult because if we would do something for this and everyone would use it, then everyone would win, right? So there's no one way to win. So the only thing that we can do is guide you in making high quality content, guide you in making the right decision on terms of SEO, but like making it original, having a clear mission, vision of your content, that will always be the job of the copywriter.
Thank you, Kevin. I hope that helps. Karine, going to come to yours next, which is, can you please explain how to use the meta fields? Jono or Nino, you can fight for that one. Yeah,
I've got this one. So I think if you're really kind of starting out at beginner level, then Yoast SEO Academy is a great place to start. It'll explain the kind of concepts behind what these are and how they work. But at a practical level, go in and click around. It will give you feedback. So there are a bunch of them, but the most important are the title and description. These are very similar to Shopify's inbuilt handling of title and description, but we like to think ours is a bit smarter. And as you interact with it, it will say, and it will guide you and give you links and help information that says, hey, we think you should be in your title, maybe using your focus keyword, for example, or in your description, hey, this is a bit long, you might want to shorten it. And again, for all of this, you can click through and find out a bit more about the underlying concepts, but the principles are just describe your page. Like your title should be the name and the pitch for why this is unique and interesting. And then your description is an opportunity to have an advert in the search results, which say, hey, here's the promise we're going to make you as a user. Here's why we're different and interesting. Here's how we stand out. And when they click that, you fulfill that promise on the page. Great, everybody wins. But yeah, go and click around, read the feedback and experiment with it.
Yeah, and to add to that, I mean, you can optimize this on a page level, of course, but if you have Yoast SEO and you go into settings, there's a tab, content settings, where you can find the settings for different content pages like products or blog posts, collection pages, whatever. And you can set variables, and those variables can really help you optimize your SEO title or meta description in bulk. Because if you set that template right, then you don't have to tweak every product. Let's say you have 20,000 products. It's a lot of time to like optimize them hand by hand. But if you use those templates, it's much easier, because normally a lot of people will use the same structure for their SEO title on products, and like with these templates that can really help you optimize SEO titles or meta description, like for all your products or blog posts or whatever.
Thank you, Nino, and I hope that helps, Karine. Chaps, last one for the Yoast guys, and then Tom, I promise I'm coming back to yourself. And this is around so many questions, which I'm loving. Thank you. Please do keep them coming in the Q&A. I'll get to as many as we possibly can. This one is around the Avada app, and it's really important I just set the scene here. I don't want this to be Avada's no good, jump over to Yoast, etc. Like, they're a great app with great people, etc., etc. The question is, I used Avada before Yoast came out for Shopify. Now I've got both apps installed. Should I use both in conjunction, or do I need to use one versus the other?
I think from a technical perspective, using both is the most nightmarish, scary thing I've ever heard. Like, I can't imagine what kind of soup is being output when they're both trying to do, let's change the meta description, let's restructure the page in the background. So I would be really nervous about conflicting stuff from the tech side. And then also, even from a content management side, if you're going in and editing your meta description in Yoast SEO, and then editing a different one in Avada, how is that behaving? Where are they conflicting? That's going to make a real mess. I guess this is also being recorded, so we should probably be a little bit sensitive about how we phrase this. But if I were to subtly hint that a huge amount of Avada's code and functionality was built and based on a certain popular WordPress app that recently came to Shopify, without naming any names now, like, when there's another question in the chat, when you click on the help links, they go to yoast.com. There is a reason for that. I would be slightly dubious about an app that's built on code from the original app that now is in the space. So, yeah.
Enough said. I think everyone gets the hint, and we will politely move on. And I hope whoever's asked that that answers your question before we get some kind of crazy lawsuit. Right, Tom, safely segueing over to you, sir. We often hear the need for keyword research before building out a site and creating a page structure, etc., etc. What tools do you guys use, and what tools do you recommend to help merchants do this?
Yeah, so I mean, like, good old-fashioned keyword research is definitely the way to go here. You know, I think a lot of sites that come to us, you know, they're often they're already existent, and the way that we normally tackle that is to optimize what they currently have. So a lot of it's based on targeting. They'll have a few different page templates, all targeting the same keywords, because they think that there's slight variations in what's on those pages, and so, you know, they create a specific page for it. That's a common theme that we see. So keyword research is really important, but at the same time, you also need to look at like merchandising, like what products do you actually have? I obviously mentioned this at the start, that, you know, if you have got a sufficient amount of products to match an intent and give a customer enough options, then you should look to create a collection because of it. If you have only one product, I wouldn't recommend creating a collection. In Shopify, everything's static. So if you create new collections, you have to manage that, even if it's one product. Otherwise, it's going to look like a very soft 404, not a great page, and it's probably going to impact us indirectly anyway. So, like, extensive keyword research, I'd recommend category by category. I wouldn't go too broad too quickly, especially if you're starting out straight away. I would like slowly scale up, figure out what works, make sure your pages are configured correctly, whether that's from like a usability perspective or from a targeting perspective. And once you know what works, start rolling that out on a wider scale. You can also then start considering what sort of related content do I actually need to create to support these pages as well. And that's not just based on like commercial pages. That's also like, you know, article-based content, FAQs, etc. So there's no hard, like, you know, I wouldn't recommend someone tries to do it like, you know, straight away themselves. I'd recommend reaching out to an SEO, or at least getting guidance to do that. But ultimately, if you want to give it a crack, then definitely keyword research, your friend. and then make sure you're cross-referencing that with what you're purchasing, what products you're actually getting in.
Tom, thank you very much. Yoast, guys, coming to you, and I've got a stack of questions coming in. So these are going to be quick fire questions on brand and everything else. So Jono and Nino, coming to you guys first. I'm struggling to write good and unique product descriptions. Do you have any tips of where I can get started?
Yes, definitely. First thing I would advise is to look into a little bit higher level. What is your mission? What makes you stand out? I mean, these days there's so much competition in e-commerce. If you make or sell the same product that everyone else has, or that a lot of people has, it will be really difficult to rank higher than your competitor, because they already out there. They already got some authority. So you really need to have something that makes you different. And when you know what it is for a specific product, then writing good and unique product description will be a lot easier. So yeah, I think it's about writing with a plan. Who's your audience? What is your keyword? What's the problem that you solve for your customer? And of course, if you have, well, boring products like screws or bolts, it will always be difficult. But yeah, then you can always look into, hey, maybe I should make my collection page a little bit more creative instead of every single product description. I'm not sure if you have anything to add to that, Jono.
No, that's great. I think, yeah, just the level of saturation is far more than I think anybody realizes. And the only way you can get any cut through is to stand out. And like, there are ways you can do that. You can be funny, you can be useful, you can be differentiated, you can be opinionated. I think the most aspirational version of that is create resources and information that other people who are asking that question then link to as resources when they're working on their content, become a primary source. So have the singularly best resource for that screw or nail that you sell, so that everybody else in the industry then cites you as the expert, and artificially create that expertise. Now, the challenge is that's hard to scale. So maybe if you have 20,000 products, that's going to be pretty tricky. There is no solution to that other than that maybe less is more. And I don't think you can legitimately demonstrate expertise, authoritativeness, or trust at a scale across 20,000 interesting products. And maybe what you need is 2,000 or 200 or even 20. So like the kind of old days where we said, oh, it's the internet, there's infinite space, let's have 1 billion products. Maybe that's not quite how you're going to get cut through and differentiate. Tricky.
Sure, I know. I look forward to seeing the feedback here and whether people agree or disagree. Just one more for you guys before I move back to Tom, and that's around XML sitemaps. Can you manage your XML sitemap by using Yoast?
Not directly, because actually, surprisingly, Shopify does quite a good job with their XML sitemaps. So every product, every page, every blog post, collection, etc., that you have on your site gets automatically bundled up and output in the XML sitemap, which Google and so on read automatically. That's really nice. The one thing we do is if you set a post or a product or a page to being no indexed, i.e., please don't put this in Google, we extract it and remove it from the XML sitemap, which is really nice because then you don't get emails from Google Search Console saying what you're doing, this doesn't make sense. And we also do the same if you put a custom canonical URL on a post, because it doesn't make sense to have conflicting URLs in there. So you don't need to touch it. We don't offer you the controls really to do that directly, but we take care of it in the background. Really nice.
Very good. And Helena just added, that's great advice, creating a resource that makes one people look up for a particular issue. Thank you for your kind feedback. And coming to you, Tom, really around image optimization. I'm just keen to understand, certainly from you guys, have you got any tips around image optimizations for people's Shopify stores?
I think images are often like one of the heaviest lags on site speed. I think there's some fundamentals. So make sure your images are compressed before you upload them. Like that's the most commonly seen issue probably, is that people just aren't compressing, which is resulting in very large images being compressed in the browser rather than by us. So that's one thing. You can use apps for that, and you can just compress it as a one-off and then turn the app off and remove the code. Again, like moving back to don't keep apps on if you're not using them. Lazy loading, always a really important step, something to always consider and always utilize. Just means that anything below the line, below the fold, as you scroll, that loads in rather than loading in an initial load. So 2 tips there, I would say. Hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you, Tom. That's brilliant. Yoast, guys, back to you. How does Yoast help with the schema markup in Shopify?
This is my baby. So I'm the biggest schema nerd on the planet. So we talked about the kind of behind the scenes technical stuff that Yoast does. One of the biggest bits of those is the structured data and schema output. So this is the metadata that makes you eligible for rich result formats in Google. You'll have seen when you get an image and a set of star ratings and a price, and it says the stock status. Those kinds of results are mostly powered by schema. And beyond that, it's a way that we can help communicate what a page is about, what your value proposition is, et cetera, in a way that helps Google explicitly understand that rather than having to guess it from the page. So I think one of the tricks with Shopify is that most of the schema in that ecosystem is pretty bad. Like you've got lots of individual apps doing individual bits of schema. They don't talk to each other. They don't interact. They don't weave a kind of coherent narrative that helps Google really understand what's on a page and what it's about. It's a bit of a mess. So the big thing we do is we detect that, we strip out all of the mess, and we replace it with a big, sophisticated structure that we build that says everything about your page. It says, here's the product, here are the offers, here's the pricing, here's the variations, here's the manufacturer, here's the VAT, here's the ISBN, the barcode. It's part of this web page, it's manufactured by these people, it's on this website, et cetera, all in a nice and visible way that helps Google really understand that. That A, makes you eligible for those rich results, but B, should in theory play nicely with things like Google Merchant Center, Facebook Marketplace. And also we have some integrations with some of the review apps. I forget which ones specifically. Nina, you might know off the top of your head.
Opinio,
Yes.
Lux, Ellie Review, and Judge.me.
That's the one. Now, so if you're using those for your reviews, we also integrate our schema output with their schema output, which gets you the nice star ratings in the search results for your products. Again, this is another thing that most users won't ever need to think about or touch, but behind the scenes, we do like a monumental amount of work. This is the thing I'm most proud of in Yoast SEO across both WordPress and Shopify. It's really sophisticated, it's really cool, and it's super future-proof. Definitely worth not caring about at all, but just knowing that we take care of it for you.
Superb, Jono. Thank you very much. Folks, please keep your questions coming. I'll do my best to get around to as many as I can. Tom, back to you, sir. What is your take on sliders at the top of websites? Are they good? Are they to be avoided? Does it not really matter?
I would recommend not using them. And it just goes back, I guess, to image optimization and image sizing. So you see this most frequently on homepages. You'll see like a few different images sliding, maybe 3 or 4 for campaigns that they've got running, and you can't lazy load them because it just doesn't work like that, because the user doesn't have to scroll for it to load. It loads on the page load. So you might have 4 images that are 100 KB each, and that means you're loading 500 kilobytes at the start of the page, which is going to cause some pretty nightmarish site speed load times. So yeah, I'd recommend against using that. I don't think it's even necessary. It's really annoying for customers, and I hate using them myself. Often they don't even have arrows to go back to the last image anyway. So it's like you have to wait for the whole carousel to go. But basically don't use them. And if you need to add your campaign, add it to the navigation as a temporary addition so that customers can find it. If you are pushing a campaign, have a static banner. You don't need to have a carousel.
There we go. You heard it here first, folks. Now, question around internationalization. Someone's asked, I'm looking to take my store internationally through one of my Shopify Plus expansion stores. What can Yoast do to help with the hreflang required? That's a Yoast question, just in case.
You want to take this one, Jono?
No, it's all yours.
So,
can if you want.
Definition of a hospital pass.
Yeah.
Go on, Nino.
So we play nicely with Shopify native internationalization. We're currently also investigating how we play, if we play nicely with other hreflang apps like Langify. So far as we currently know, is that we work pretty well with Langify. So yeah, we know that this stuff is really important. We're looking into if we can make this better. So far, we didn't hear of any problems. So it seems that we're playing nicely with everyone. Yeah, but we just want to make sure and investigate that further with all the other Shopify apps.
I know behind the scenes, we also do some other localization bits, like we pick up the site language from Shopify and we output that in some of the meta tags. We output it in some of the schema. I think some of those fields aren't translatable yet, but none of the important ones. So yeah, there's room for improvement, but I think nothing's going to break, which is really nice.
Guys, thank you. And keeping on the topic of internationalization, Tom, coming over to your side, outside of Yoast, is there anything else from an SEO perspective that people need to bear in mind when they're looking to explore their international strategy?
Yeah, I think like the fundamental one is it like, is there the revenue and is there the engagement from those markets you're looking to expand into? So a good way of actually doing this is in your search console. You can go to country, who's visiting your site, who's clicking on and engaging with your site, because it's likely that they know the brand. If that number is substantially high and you can make a business case that if you were to translate those clicks into revenue, that it's worthwhile having another store that you need to manage, then that's a massive consideration you should take. Shopify has obviously released markets relatively recently, which is still very new, and I'm sure people are experimenting with it. We've had a solid amount of initial experience with it, but I think from like the hreflang output, supposedly it's automated, which yet to figure out the how good it is. But that's one part, and also localization is another part. But while on the topic of localization, actually, really, really important that if you do expand, don't just like duplicate your content, try and localize it. So if in the US, swap the S's for Z's. Like those small differences actually make the intent like quite substantially different. Ultimately, if someone's searching for something in US English and we have a UK English site, then they're unlikely to find us, and they'll find competitors that are localized.
Superb. Thank you, chaps. Yusuf, good afternoon, sir. Good to see you. Question has come in from Yusuf around, can you please repeat your experience with Shopify markets, Tom?
Yeah, so we have a client that's currently migrating from Magento to Shopify, but they're also moving to Shopify markets. So it's quite a big experience for us. I think obviously previously you'd need a separate Shopify store. And the benefit of having a separate Shopify instance was that you can localize content for each of those individual stores. Currently with Shopify markets, we don't actually have that functionality. We can't really localize in that way. There are some automations like hreflang that are going in, and supposedly there's some auto translate static content that is also applied. But from a localization perspective specifically, that isn't currently included in markets. But it's an interesting space. It means you only need one Shopify store, and you can grow kind of as far as you want to with it, rather than having to continually pay for 5 or 6 different stores.
And that's what we've certainly seen from a Shopify perspective, Tom, is that people are almost using Shopify markets to test the water and to say, okay, let's see what traction we get. And then we say, okay, there's a lot of throughput here. We almost justify an EU store or a US store, or actually within EU, we need a German store, a French store, etc. And then that's where you justify an expansion store with localized content, etc. So it's almost learn with Shopify markets, and then you have a business case to then say, now we justify an expansion store.
Sure.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. I just felt like I better contribute something today. So hopefully, Yusuf, that's helped, and good to see you, my friend, and thank you for joining. Coming back to Yoast, there's a question around migrations. Now, obviously, you guys are, I'd say, famous for the world of WordPress and what you've done in that space, and I'm excited to see the waves that you can make over in Shopify. Now, the question is that some of our clients have worked really hard to build their SEO ranking in WordPress, particularly within WooCommerce, etc. They're now deciding actually they've hit some limitations. They want to come over to Shopify. Do they have to start from scratch, or can they carry stuff over? How does it work?
I don't know the technical specifics of how it will hurt your rankings, but John can probably tell that better than me. But you don't have to start all over. And we actually recently, because we also acknowledged this problem, and we recently released a SEO data migration within a CSV import export. People that have been using us on WordPress might have seen already our CSV importer exporter feature, where you can export your data and then import it again. Something similar works here, but then on Shopify, it's only your SEO data, with the SEO title and with the description being the most important ones. And of course, Shopify has an importer, but only for description, I believe, and I don't think they have any yet for like blog posts or anything. So yeah, that will be a problem probably. Yeah.
So there's going to be some manual work involved, right? I guess so. That's the good news, sort of. I guess the bad news is that site migrations are complex and risky, and there aren't many ways around that. Like, there's no such thing as a site migration. What you're doing is building a new site and then trying to move some content across. You're not taking your existing site and moving it. So there's always some risk involved in that, because the code's going to be different, the templates are going to be different, the functionality is going to be different, the way the system works is going to be different. You're not going to have parity between your page content quite. So there's a lot of stuff is going to change, and some of that's going to be better and some of it's going to be worse. There are things you can do to mitigate that. So the simplest version is a lot of your SEO equity is stored in URL level. Your individual pages are what matters. So you need to make sure you're redirecting those with a 301 redirect from where they were to where they are now. And you do that at scale, you do it systematically, you do it for every page, every blog post, every category, page 8 of whatever blog archive, every single URL. And you mitigate some of the risk there. And then you also look at, okay, what are we moving this stuff into? Is it fast enough? Is it good enough? Is it clean enough? Is the schema good? Is the meta stuff set up right? And you really obsess over that before you launch it, because it's so easy to miss little details. And it's best to prepare yourself for some degree of turbulence there. Even if you do the best job in the world, you've missed something and stuff has changed. So yeah, you can move. Some of it you can automate and systemize through exporting and importing. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of manual work and there is some risk involved, but not to say that you can't or you shouldn't. It is doable.
Jono, just building on that in terms of the kind of URL structure and the continuation of, okay, all these products need redirecting, all these pages, all these blog posts, etc. I guess a concern for many people is, well, how on earth am I going to know all the different pages that have been indexed and products, etc.?
Yeah.
Is there a tool or resource that you can point people towards listening to say, don't worry, we've got that covered. Go to this tool. You can pull a full CSV that shows you everything that's been indexed. And then all you've got to do is basically set the redirect to field to say all of those, send to all of these.
Yeah, definitely. So there's 3 I'd recommend. I would choose some combination of Screaming Frog or Sitebull are like the 2 leading download this piece of software, go and crawl your site, collect all the URLs. They're really good. They're really comprehensive. They will find stuff you didn't know existed. I would take the output of those, one or both of them if you've got the budget, they're relatively cheap. And then also look at Google Search Console, which isn't going to give you everything, but it will give you things that the others didn't find. It will give you things that Google has found that you didn't even know existed, or weird odds and ends. Collect all those URLs, make a big list, and then redirect them. Don't fall into the trap of going, oh, we'll just do the top 100 products, or, oh, we'll only do stuff that's had 100 visits in the last year. You really do have to do everything, and it's grueling and it's tedious, but that's what makes the difference.
Jono, thank you. Tom, coming to you next, sir, which is around backlinks. And this is a question we're often asked, which is really around, how do people create strong backlinks for their Shopify store? Is it linked to having a great content strategy, a digital PR? Like, how do we, listening today, take what we've learned and then by tomorrow we're starting to build good value backlinks?
Yeah, I think this actually just touches on what Jono was suggesting earlier, where you become the industry leader. You're producing content that other vendors are actually linking to because you are the authority in the space. And naturally that is organically building your backlink profile the moment that you start producing content quite like that. Obviously, you can also invest in digital PR, which is something that we also do at Novos. And that's a really effective way of also, implementing specific tactics, whether that's campaign-based, whether that's an always-on approach to link building, which gives you an opportunity to basically create campaigns that are very newsworthy. They are picked up by publications. They link back to your site from normally high-value sources, and that can also build your backlink profile. Content strategy generally, if you want to produce good continuous backlink growth, I'd recommend continually investing in your content strategy. And to do that, again, it's worth speaking to an SEO just to give you some guidance on how exactly to build out your content strategy, because your perception of what people might be interested in is actually not at all aligned with what people are actually interested in. And before you start investing in content creation or working with a copywriter, make sure that strategy is in place first. Once you've got that in motion, you become that slowly become that industry leader. People know to come to you to get specific information, and hopefully vendors also do, and that results in that organic backlink growth. Especially if you haven't got that money to invest in digital PR straight away.
Thank you, Tom. Yoast, guys, question for you around when is done. And I always refer to someone like my dad with this around. He loves to tinker and play around with his store and his product pages and everything else, which is fantastic. But at the same time, how long is there like a benchmark to say, you know what, if you're spending like 15 hours on a page, it's probably time to move on? When can we say to people, you know what, you've done enough here, you can now move on?
That's a difficult question because it really depends on how much time you have. I mean, if you're a one-man business and you need to do everything yourself, that your time is probably limited. So you'll just do all the basics and then move on to the next product page or the next sales conversation, or well, everything, if whatever. And if you have a small team, you probably have more time to optimize. In terms of when it's done, personally, I don't think a product page can ever be done. You should always look to optimize, and at the same time, don't stare yourself death into striving for perfection. Because when you strive for perfection and you keep looking at that one sentence and you try to optimize that one, sometimes it's just okay to improve it for a couple of percentages and then let it go for that time. And then, well, next week or next month, there's another period of time to look at those product pages, and maybe you have a brilliant idea to improve it then. And my last suggestion would be to don't guess or expect too much. If you have enough traffic coming to your online store, just do some A/B testing, and then not A/B testing of a color button or something really small, because that's not going to make the difference. But try A/B testing the bigger stuff.
Very good. Thank you, Nino. I think, folks, realistically, probably a chance for one more question each. If anyone has got anything else, please put it in the Q&A. I will try and squeeze it in before we look to wrap up. Coming to you, Yoast, guys, next, which is around how important are making blog posts for your SEO. It always seems one of those things that it's like, oh, I haven't got the time. That's always one for later. Actually, is that a bit of an error? And do we need to be prioritizing blogging and writing more content?
Well, I believe so. I mean, making new blog posts is a great way to drive more traffic to your website. More traffic to your website means potentially more sales. So in that sense, it's definitely worth it to spend some time into making blog posts. You can make how-to content or FAQ content, explaining how your product works or how you should use your product or how the market is working. So definitely worth it to start making blog posts.
I think, just echoing back to what we were saying earlier, there are so many people selling the thing that you're selling. And the answer to that isn't go write lots of blog posts. The answer to that is have content that solves people's problems, that demonstrates expertise, that positions you as an expert, that validates and explores your proposition and solves different types of user intent. Like, people are at different stages of the funnel. They have different questions. They have different levels of education and expertise. They have different levels of problem solution awareness. Your blog or your non-product pages can target these kinds of problems and help people in ways that your product pages probably can't. And then if we take a step back a bit further towards link building, typically your mental model is, how do I reach an audience who are maybe going to buy the thing I'm going to selling? From an SEO perspective, you want to be reaching an audience who are potentially going to engage with, read, link to, retweet, influence around your content, which is a much bigger pool, and that's a different type of content from here is my product and it's on sale. So you need to be really thinking about, I need a different mechanism for different types of content than product content, and a blog is an easy starting place to do that.
Jono, thank you. Final question from me, and this is for you, Tom, which is around, we've talked a lot about Shopify, how great it is, how good it is for SEO and all that good stuff, but it doesn't come without its limitations, right? what are the limitations when it comes to Shopify and SEO, just to make sure that we wrap up today by giving a really fully rounded picture?
Yeah, I would say I'll do three. I'll say like the fundamental limitation is it's taxonomy, or it's very, very flat structure. You can't have sub collections, at least without hacking it. And that's always a big limitation. It just makes it very difficult to build the relationship between homepage, category, subcategory, products. You kind of have to forcibly do it. And there are ways that tactics that you can look to do that. Of course, that the sub collection creation that I mentioned earlier, it's not technically a sub collection, but the way that you structure it is that you click on a jeans collection, for instance. You might have 3 different variations of blue, black, and green jeans. I don't think they exist, but that also then gives you that kind of structure build out, that you've got this jeans collection that's got all the different jeans that you've got, but then you can filter it. And by filtering it by the various different types of color, will refine the collection, also build that relationship. So that's a good way around it, but also a big limitation. I guess like natively breadcrumbs aren't included out of the box for Shopify, and that's always something that is often missed as well. Breadcrumbs, again, fundamental in building that relationship between homepage and the rest of the site, and all the way back again as well. And this actually extends all the way into articles as well, because breadcrumbs also exist there. And because obviously that the navigation structure natively isn't, is very flat, it's really important that you have that set up. And another kind of aspect, like a secondary level of the breadcrumb, is that you have to kind of hack away to set a primary category for a product that sits in multiple locations. So if you've got 4 different collections, same product that sits in all, you'll have 4 different breadcrumbs unless you specify one singular primary category that should live in. And obviously, if you've got conflicting breadcrumbs, that will always be a problem for you as well. And there are just some improvements that you just can't make unless you kind of move to a headless configuration, just purely because it's just not possible. You can try your best to hack your way through Shopify to get to where you want to go, but as I said, you'll never get better than a 7 or 8 unless you move to completely custom headless build, where you can maximize the amount of things that you can do, such as building sub collections if you really wanted to. So yeah, just a few off the top of my head, but there are a lot more. But there are, see, as I said, Shopify is probably the best platform at this current point in time for SEO.
I was going to say, Tom, as a Shopify specialist, I've heard quite enough from you. But in all seriousness, a massive thank you to everyone that's joined today. I mean, to have an hour of Tom's time, of Jono's time, of Nina's time has been absolutely unbelievable. What I'd like to do just to wrap up, and I'll make sure that we follow up with everyone that's kind enough to join us today. A recording will be sent out, and we'll talk about possibly doing another session, because I know there's plenty of questions that perhaps we didn't get around to today, that maybe we can do on a next session. But just a final thing is, Tom, if you can just remind people about Novos, how to get in touch, etc., and then the same for Yoast. I mean, it's the least we can do is just give you a little chance to have a little plug before we wrap up on today's session. So over to you, Tom.
Yeah, sure. So Novos, we are specialists in SEO for e-commerce. We do obviously on page and we do off page as well. We have an in-house data team which makes, especially for like digital PR purposes, makes our campaigns super insightful and very relevant content. To get in touch, our site is thisisnovos.com, or to get in touch with me, it's tom.gandy. You'll probably misspell Gandy, a lot of people do. Gandhi at thisisnovos.com. And yeah, honestly, if you've got any questions to follow up on this, it doesn't have to be prospecting related, just any questions at all, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Tom. I suggest also connecting with everyone on LinkedIn and reaching out, and it's another great way to keep up to date with all the content that everyone, both from Novos, Yoast, and also at Quickfire, are sharing kind of constantly. And finally, just the Yoast guys, where's best for people to go to sign up, to find out more, etc.?
First of all, thanks to you, Nathan, as well, for hosting this and getting all these people in one room. So that was really nice.
Thank you.
And then in terms of reaching out to us, I mean, we have an app listing. Everyone that's using Shopify will know there's an app store. I put our link in the in the chat. There's a 14-day trial which you can try out Yoast. We will help you with writing great content, and we'll do all the technical SEO stuff for you in the background. And that's about it. If you have any questions, our support team and myself, and Jono will be there to answer any questions. Reach out and we'll help you. And Thank you for your time.
Folks, perfect. 1 minute to spare, 3:59. Thank you for joining. Have a fabulous rest of your afternoon and watch this space. We'll be in touch very shortly. Thanks again. Take care.